This is 6 Minute English from bbclearningenglish.com.
Hello and welcome to this edition of 6 Minute English with me, Dima Kostenko.
And me, Kate Collin.
And Kate is here not simply to keep me company, but also to give us some language guidance.
I'll do my best.
And to begin with, could you explain what a metaphor is?
Oh, well, that's a good question. And to give you a simple answer, I'll need to talk a little bit about another figure of speech, a simile. A simile is when you directly compare two things, often using the words like or as. For example, he slept like a log, a commonly used simile meaning he slept really well, completely undisturbed. Now that's a simile. A metaphor is when you imply or state a comparison between things that are not similar. For example, the house is so neglected and dirty that all the cleaning she's done this week is just a drop in the ocean. Now, of course, her cleaning work does not and cannot look like a drop of water in the sea, and yet this is a common way of saying that the amount of something, here her work, is too little compared to how much is still needed.
Now, I've got a different kind of question for you. This time it's not about the language, it's about you. Are you a competitive person, would you say?
Not really. I remember being quite competitive when I was at school in sports, but in general now I wouldn't say I'm that competitive.
But do you enjoy watching competitions, things like sports, games, any of that?
Yes, I do. I mean, some competitions can be very exciting and they're so varied. I mean, they range from just straightforward sport competitions to some extremely unusual ones. Recently, for example, I read about the longest handshaking competition which took place in Australia.
Yeah, and I think I watched another interesting one also quite recently from Estonia. There, they hold those mobile phone throwing competitions.
What, they see how far they can throw the mobile phone?
Exactly.
Well, here in England they have welly throwing competitions where they get a Wellington boot, a rubber boot, and they throw that as far as they can.
Well, human fantasy is always like that, has no limits whatsoever.
I know there's some really strange competitions around.
But if you think these competitions are unusual, then stay with us for the next few minutes as we're listening to a report from South Africa about a competition that brings a whole new meaning to the word unusual. But first, do you mind taking us through some of today's key vocabulary, Kate?
Not at all. Well, first of all, we had the term broadband internet system, which means a system that makes it possible for many messages or large amounts of information to be sent all at the same time and very quickly. Another term we're going to hear is gigabyte, meaning a unit of computer information consisting of 1024 megabytes. And importantly, pigeon, which is a large, usually grey bird, often seen in towns, which can be trained to carry messages. Also, as you're listening, notice how our correspondent uses sport metaphors to bring some colour to his report, making it sound more interesting. The words to listen out for are race, lane 1, lane 2, the course, and sprint.
So that's broadband internet system, gigabyte, pigeon, and a few sport metaphors. OK, here's our reporter in Johannesburg, Andrew Harding.
It was a strange sort of race. In Lane 1, South Africa's giant telecom company, using the country's broadband internet system. In Lane 2, an 11-month-old pigeon named Winston, carrying a 4-gigabyte memory stick strapped to his leg. The course, a simple 60-mile sprint between an office in the town of Howick and another in the coastal city of Durban.
So the aim of the competition was simple: to discover which would be the fastest to deliver a large amount of data from one office to another one, 60 miles or nearly 100 kilometres away. A supposedly fast broadband system, or a carrier pigeon.
And here comes this week's question for you. Which do you think won the unusual race? Was it the humble pigeon? Was it the highly sophisticated internet? Or did they both perform equally well? What do you think, Kate?
Well, I think this may be a trick question, so I'm going to go for the humble pigeon, because going from my experience, the internet often has communication problems.
OK, but I'm not going to tell you the answer because I thought you might prefer to get it first-hand, directly from Andrew Harding, by listening to the next part of his report.
Good idea. And here's some more key vocabulary to listen out for. To win comfortably, meaning to win easily, leaving the other contestants far behind. Encrypted, which means electronically changed into a secret code. And the phrasal verb to get through, meaning to reach, to get delivered.
OK, that's to win comfortably, encrypted. and to get through. Let's listen.
The result does say something about the state of broadband in South Africa and the continent as a whole. Winston, you won't be surprised to discover, won the race comfortably. He reportedly delivered his cargo in just over an hour. The data, encrypted in case he'd got lost on the way, was then downloaded in another hour or so, by which time only 4% of the data sent by internet had got through.
So Winston the pigeon comfortably won the race over broadband. By the time the download of the data delivered by Winston was completed, only 4% of the information sent via the internet had got through, which means I was correct.
Yes, Kate, you were absolutely right. OK, let's have a quick recap of some of today's key vocabulary.
Broadband internet system. Pigeon, to win comfortably. Encrypted, to get through, meaning to reach. And of course we pointed out that using metaphors can make a story sound more interesting and vivid.
Thanks, Kate. Until next week.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That was 6 Minute English from bbclearningenglish.com.